I want to take this recording and discuss divorce, to discuss something that plagues both me and many people of my generation these days. Because no one seems to be faithful nowadays to one another. Or at least that is my viewpoint. Coming from hearing things like from my grandmother, who had lived so long with their partner, so long with them, and never gave up until one of them died. And only then did they part, from a young age of even below their 20s. And it's to me that story that seems so unfeasible nowadays, so unlikely. And let's face it, this reality is hard. Effectively, your life becomes divided into between your father and your mother. Most times. Or father, mother, things like that. Nature, depending on how you were raised, what you grew up being raised with, or people that you were around. Or perhaps having, a stepfather or stepmother. I'm lucky enough not to have that. And to be out of the house at this point, and not have to deal with that for all my years of living under divorced parents. Effectively, everything is in two. Christmas is in two. Thanksgiving is in two. Your social life almost can be in two. Stretched between the people that your father knows and the people that your mother knows. Being stuck doing events when your time dedicated to your mother or father comes up, seeming like you had a separate life. And that is the hard part about it. Because even afterwards, even after college, when you're in college or even beyond that point, you still have to find ways to go up and see both your mother and your father because you want to have a relationship with them most times. Other people, they don't have a relationship with one, it might have a relationship with the other. Others might just have nothing. But for the rest of this, I want to apply it more to mine, which... Let me start over again. I want to just focus on my situation with this recording, which is I have a good relationship with my mother and father, but they are divorced, so I'm still stuck in almost having two different lives. That is the context for whatever I say next. I call it the divide, really. Because you're divided into, split between two. And sometimes the hardest thing to do is to make that whole again. For me, I found that out during college, when I thought it would be the best idea just to try and make my life a little bit more whole. So I ended up going actually on my father's side of everything, because I deemed that my lifestyle was more akin to his than my mother's. But growing up, I had two different lives, and in some ways I acted completely differently depending on what person I was around. It was very weird, I won't lie, feeling like that. Like I could almost see myself as being a jokester type, very rambunctious, not listening half the time when I was with my mother, but then more calm, subtle, and even, dare I say, a great son when I was around my father. You act differently when you have a relationship with both your parents that is good and you come back to once in a while. Or you switch back and forth constantly, I should say. The divide really becomes apparent when you grow up. And it might not even be, well, you're under their care, but then you start to realize once you're on your own and you have to bring those two halves into a single entity, creating a life that is one. And it's weird. If you've been split all your life and have only come to know that divide, it's hard because you're trying to figure out, how am I going to act? Who am I going to side with? Who do I want to be with? Do I want to be out on my own fully? Do I want to stick to one parent or the other? These are all questions you have to ask yourself when you're trying to honestly bring your life into something that's whole. And even this divide between lives, like this could be applied to many things. Like let's say you live in California, but then, okay, so you live in California for the winter, and then you live in, I don't know, Montana during the winter months. You effectively have two different lives in two different locations. In a way, it's kind of like divorce in that sense. If you're like, in my situation, that's you have two different households. And let's face it, eventually, just like my grandmother, there comes a point where you don't want that anymore. You don't want to be divided anymore. You just want to find something that's whole. And it's unsustainable to be like that. So just like my grandmother, you have to choose a side. And when I'm talking about she had to choose, I meant in terms of physical location, getting older, the warmer weather really helps her out, I should say. But when it comes to divorce, eventually you got to put the two halves together to create this life, create your own life, so that you can physically function. Because if you are still divided, what half goes to what? Is kind of the question. And there are some hardships with divorce that I never had to face as brutally as some others. I had a friend who had gotten his parents' divorce around 13, 14 years old. And that is hard. Hard in my situation, which I think I was maybe around 5 or 6. I was very young when my parents got divorced. And I always thought, as a result, that's why it almost seemed more normal, this life. In a way, it just made it kind of more complex, layered on the line, because I came so accustomed to it. Unlike my friends who had to deal with it while he was very much aware of what was happening. I was very unaware of what was happening and the severity of what was happening when it was happening. And I guess it can be like that for the kids. If it happens so young to them, they don't even notice that this is not how other people live. There's another way that is more common and more normal in our society. When in reality, this is probably the unknown one. Or not the unknown one, but least common denominator. And I'll tell you this as well, coming from someone with divorced parents. I'm a guy who wants to have kids one day, who wants to have 2 children, who wants to grow a family. But I don't want to do that divorced. Because not only am I just going to end up alone, yes, I'll have my kids, but I'll be alone. In the sense that I have no wife that I can, lean upon when times are hard. A true best friend of sorts that I can just lean on. Someone that will listen to me. Because let's face it, your kids are great, but they don't understand you in that sense, like a spouse would. I don't want that for my kids either. I want them to know the way I want them to learn. Learning that, well, mommy and daddy will be there for them. That they will always have a united family. And I guess that's just a generational thing. Not wanting what the prior generation wanted, in a sense, that is seen as bad. Like, because I grew up around divorced parents, I want my kids to never experience that. I never want them to feel like they did something potentially wrong, even if they were old enough to understand that. I always say I want what my grandparents had, because both of them, both sides, my mother and my father's, stayed with each other till the day they died. And for me, and also as a person who's been very isolated of his life and has lost many friends because of his own actions, just want someone who will stay loyal, who will be with me, who will want to be with me. They'll tell me, and so I can tell them what is wrong, so that this does not have to happen. And honestly, things like this make me wonder when I can even get a wife so this doesn't happen. Like, is it logical, like my grandparents, to do it so early on? Or do I take more of an approach that my parents did, which was, well, wait till later in life, which in retrospect probably isn't, because they got divorced anyways. And it seems like it would be more logical to marry young like my grandparents did, but that's not so much the case. It's not as clear-cut as that. And I feel like it's more complex than that. I think to avoid being divorced, not only do I have to know the person for a very long time, make them, as one girl that I listened to online said, make them your best friends. Your spouse should become your best friend and your partner in life. And I can't say I disagree with it, because it sounds logical, to me at least, that your partner for life becomes also your best friend. And I feel like that will help as well. Also, perhaps being at a point where you're ready to settle down. Because what actually drove my parents away were distance. Long distance never worked out for them. And honestly, I think that is probably a major problem that many long distance people face. And if they get a divorce, if they're a husband and wife already, that potentially can be the problem, is distance. So I think it would help if, not necessarily to the point where they're working together, but just simply working in the same town as one another. Maybe even sharing a goal with one another. Something to strive for. That's, I think, just the best you can do with physical location. But from a mental standpoint, that's where it gets a lot more dicey. Do you want someone who's very similar to you, who can bounce off ideas of the same nature as you do? Or do you want someone who's completely the opposite of you? Someone who can fill voids that you lack within yourself for a family. And that potentially can make it interesting for the long haul. Because in reality, once you know everything about a person, it kind of loses that appeal. Once we know everything about someone, that's what happens. In seduction, that is exactly what kills it. The mystery, the intrigue. Once that is gone, the seduction dissipates, in a sense. And really, that is also probably another thing, that mystery of the person. Like, if we totally know each other, like, I think we should know a lot about each other. But if we know absolutely everything about each other to the point where even the words we say are not even new to us, I think it loses that spark, and maybe we start going out cheating, and that ends up getting us a divorce. The key takeaway of this recording is that I've debated divorce. I don't know how exactly I can avoid getting a divorce in the future, how I can prevent it before I fully commit to someone that potentially could divorce me at any time. What I can do to my character in order to make my partner feel like they could live with me for the rest of their life, and how it can work out. Thank you for listening if you did fully. It's just rambling. I kind of get it in a sense. But it's for me and me only. Thank you.